Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're really glad you're here. My name's Kent Dobson. I'm one of the pastors here at Mayflower. It's really a deep honor to be with all of you, to be here, to remember Brock. This is a memorial service, a celebration, a chance to grieve, remember, speak some words, point to what ultimately matters. And it's really important that all of you are here. It means a lot to the family. And this church, as you can imagine, has seen births and baptisms and confirmations and weddings, a lot of weddings, and many, many funerals. It's a sacred space. It's a chance for us to turn our hearts to what matters most. And that's what we'll be doing over the next few moments, over the next few minutes. And the service we have planned today is unique and really has a unique flavor to it. We hope that it honors Brock's memory and life and legacy. And you'll see in your program we have a variety of speakers, a variety of offerings. And that's the direction that we're headed today. And again, we're really, really glad you're here. We want to begin with a special song. It's actually sung by Sherry's father, late father. It's based on the 23rd Psalm. I don't know what your experience is with church, but most people know at least something of Psalm 23, which begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want." This is penned by David, the desert poet, some 2,500 years ago. And this particular song, which is what the Psalms were, they were songs, have been sung at funerals for just about as long, for the last 2,000 years, drawing us to the scriptures and drawing us to this unique poem. So that's how we're going to begin. We'll begin with a song, so we'll just ask you to settle in and tune into the words and listen to the music. Let's begin in prayer. Let us pray. Today we remember the words of David, the desert king. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. As we gather today, fill our hearts with deep peace, even as we grieve. Meet us in our loss today. Walk with us through the valley of the shadow of death. Prepare a table before us. May we celebrate and honor Brock today and all that he gave to his friends and family. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. It's important to say a few words from the scriptures, just a short reflection on my part. And I think it's important to admit that I didn't know Brock. And every time you meet with the family, you start to get a feel and a flavor for someone. And I was told that I could wear a Carhartt, so that was something. That gave me my first clue. And I do have a Carhartt, and I drive an F-150, even though I have a black suit on. So I feel a kindred spirit in a way, even though I didn't know him. And it's also important to gather together as a community of friends and family, to mourn, to remember, to seek God, even in our low moments. It's a chance for us to reflect not only on Brock's life, but on our own. There's something about every memorial service that sort of rings the bell of our own mortality, of our own limited time. And that's true with Brock, too. We all wish that he could have had a longer life. So it's a chance for us to reflect as well. And right away, what struck me most was that he seemed kind of a larger-than-life type of person who inspired people, inspired friends and families and communities. And I thought about Jesus' line, "I have come that they may have life and have life to the fullest." And that was my sense. Brock lived a full life. And that kind of spilled out all over the place. And I thought of a parable of Jesus. Sometimes when you sit with a family as a pastor, you get a little nudge. Oh, what about this? As something to reflect on. So I thought about a parable. And primarily because I see Jesus as kind of a larger-than-life figure too. He was actually kind of wild. I know we tame him down and put a little white robe on him with a blue sash or something. None of that is probably historically accurate. He hiked all over the place. He hiked all over Galilee, all over Israel, all over the desert with his friends. And he told stories. And he went on boat rides at night. He did all kinds of wild things. He ate in people's homes. He showed up and celebrated meals with people. He even caused trouble and got kicked out of synagogues. That's the story and the person of Jesus, definitely a larger-than-life kind of person. And as you probably know, he loves stories. And I'm just going to read just a short little section from his stories. We call them parables, and that's what they are. It's a parable, but it's just a story. That's how he liked to teach. And here's the story that came to mind. The kingdom is like a man going to another country who called his own servants and entrusted goods to them. To one he gave 5 talents. That means basically a unit of money. So he said, to one he gave 5 talents. To another he gave 2 talents. And to a third he gave 1 talent. And then he went on his journey. Immediately, he who received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And in the same way, the one who had 2 talents also gained 2 more. But he who received 1 talent went away and dug a hole and put it in the earth and did nothing. After a long time, the master returned and had a chat with his servants and reconciled the accounts. The Lord said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things here. I will set you over many things. enter into the joy of the Lord. That's what he said to the one with 5 talents. And he went to the one with 2 talents. And the Lord said, you delivered to me 2 more talents. Behold, I gained another 2. Welcome. Of course, to the final one, he said, I guess this is my paraphrase, sorry, you're out of luck. You wasted the life that you were given. You wasted the talents. You wasted the gifts you were given. You didn't do anything with it. That story is the one that struck me because that's what I heard from Brock's life. He took the gifts that he received from life, from God, from the mystery of life, and he did something with them. And they grew, and that spilled out all over to his friends and family, to those who loved him. Why am I sharing this? Well, because it's kind of inspiring. Brock's life is kind of inspiring as I've heard stories. And just as he lived a full life, the full life he was given, even though we wish it would have been longer, that's an inspiration for each of us to live a full life. So this is what I'd like to offer you today. It's a little line from Mary Oliver, the poet. It's kind of a haunting line, really. She says, "What will you do with your one wild and precious life?" That's what comes to mind at a memorial service, especially the life of someone who lived a full and wild life, a full life. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? So may Brock's life inspire you today as you hear from family. May you not just sit on the gifts that you've been given, and may you leave this place with feeling both the brevity and preciousness of life and live while you can. In the name of Christ, the wild Galilean who changed the world. Amen. We want to invite you now to sing. And I don't know when the last time you sang in church was, but what we do is we stand up and we open up the old hymnal. So hymn 334, I believe it is Amazing Grace. And we're going to sing verses 1 and 2 and then the last verse.
Thank you all for coming today to celebrate Brock's life. If Brock had his way, he'd have you all out doing something other than sitting in a church talking about him. But I've learned that your love and support are helping us all put one foot in front of the other during these days of profound grief. And for that, I am truly grateful. Most of you know that I'm a teacher, and I love sharing stories. Today, I want to honor Brock the best way I know how by sharing our story, the story of how a small-town Michigan girl ended up marrying a big boy, city boy from California. I've been blessed with many wonderful friends over the years, and one of those is Deb, Emily's mom. We've been friends since our daughters were in preschool, so she knows me well. After getting to know Brock, Emily's future father-in-law, she became convinced the two of us should meet. Well, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with this idea. He lived in California and I lived in Michigan. It seemed ridiculous. Brock wasn't much more enthusiastic. At one point, he even told Deb to call off the dogs. It was his way of telling Deb to give it up. And he told Jeff to tell Deb to call off the dogs. It was his way of telling Deb to give it up. And for more than a year, she kept gently nudging us. Then one day, she showed me a picture of Brock, a handsome man with a sweet baby perched on his shoulders. Something about that photo softened my heart, and that day I decided to be brave. After all, it couldn't hurt to send one email. But how do you even begin such an email? Well, I had recently taught my second graders that writers sometimes begin with a question to hook their readers. So that's exactly what I did. On October 11, 2014, I wrote, "Did you ever have a pen pal when you were a kid?" This feels like that to me. As a teacher, I've had pen pals with other classrooms and even once with my daughter's students in Singapore, but I've never done it on a personal level. Since I'm committed to being brave and taking risks, here goes. I think I secretly made that email so dorky that he'd lose interest and Deb would be satisfied that I'd at least tried. But that's not what happened. Instead, one email became another, and then another. And for the next 9 months, we exchanged emails almost daily. Neither of us expected them to lead anywhere, but little by little, we stopped writing about what we did, and we started sharing who we were. We shared the ordinary details of our days, disappointments that had shaped us, the relationships that had changed us, and the dreams we still had for our future. I discovered a man who is genuine, loyal, hardworking, deeply committed, unafraid to share his heart, and incredibly funny. Then he asked if I'd like to talk on the phone. I remember thinking, whoa, this feels like second base. My head immediately started listing all the reasons not to, but my heart quietly reminded me, be brave, just do it. So I did. That phone call lasted more than an hour, and before long, our relationship settled into a rhythm. Emails during the week, long phone call, dates every weekend. The miles between us began to matter less and less as we came to know each other's hearts. Finally, in late August of 2015, after 9 months of emails and countless hours on the phone, we met for the first time at Jeff and Emily's house, which was just a few blocks from mine, where Brock was babysitting Maddie, that sweet baby, on the shoulders in the photo. It's funny to think that after all those months of waiting, our first meeting lasted only a few seconds before we both knew something had changed. Whenever Brock told the story, he'd smile and say, "I watched her walk across the room and I knew I was in trouble." I'd laugh when he'd say that because the truth is, so was I. 2 years later, on August 6, 2017, we were married in the backyard of Brock's beautiful home on the river, surrounded by family and friends. And over the next 9 years, our family grew from 4 grandchildren to 8. We shared incredible adventures together, trips to Singapore, Spain, time in the Sierra Mountains, backroads bike trips, races and triathlons. But some of our sweetest memories were more closer to home. Grandkids sleepovers, Camp Rockford, cheering from the sidelines, and simply supporting the people we loved. Nothing made Brock happier. He was an exceptional husband, father, and grandfather. Words cannot express how much I will miss him. A few days after Brock's passing, our granddaughter Nellie came home from Camp Henry with a Sharpie tattoo of a heart and an arrow on her arm. I asked her what it meant. She said, "It means follow your heart, Nana." I asked her to draw one on my arm too, because that's exactly what Brock and I did. For me, following your heart means being willing to listen to God's gentle direction. My hope is that by sharing our story, you'll see that sometimes the biggest blessings begin with the smallest acts of courage. When God gently nudges you towards something that feels right, even if it feels uncertain, I hope you'll have the courage to listen. I want to leave you with a line from Brock's favorite movie, The Sandlot. Remember, kid, there's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Follow your heart, kid, and you'll never go wrong. Thank you, Brock, for a great love and for a decade of a life I never dreamed possible.
you stand up here. You're all a little blurry, so that's really good too. I'm Beth, Brock's youngest sister. There are 4 of us siblings: Jean, the oldest, Brock, our middle sister Sue, and me. Brock was 10 years older than me, my big brother. As I began writing this tribute and wondered where to start, I searched, what is a big brother? Google's answer began simply: a male sibling older than you. But then it went on to say, the role often extends far beyond birth order. In a family, a big brother often becomes a natural protector, mentor, and lifelong companion. Who helps younger siblings find their way in the world. Google got that exactly right. It seemed as if I had searched who is Brock. Brock was my hero from my earliest memories. I remember sitting in the bleachers at a ball field, traveling to tournaments to watch him play baseball. Honestly, I often end up at the nearby playground, but even then, I knew he was something special. In our 3-bedroom house, our sisters shared one room, and Brock and I shared a room together. I became his companion. He trusted me to tell him whether his socks matched, and often took me along on Christmas Eve to the corner 5 and dime to help choose gifts for the family. All of us siblings went to the same high school, but Brock had left a mark there long before I arrived. Even 10 years later, teachers and coaches still remembered him, not just his name, but the kind of person he was. When they realized I was his younger sister, I felt an immediate sense of pride. Being known as Brock Riddle's little sister made me feel connected to something good, something admired, and that feeling has stayed with me all these years. Brock was practical and dependable, the kind of person who knew how to fix things and who could be counted on without hesitation. He rebuilt the engine of my first car, a 1972 Datsun 510 that had once been his. And later, when I bought my first home, he offered wise advice, grounded in experience, common sense, and care. He had a calm, capable way of making unfamiliar challenges feel less overwhelming. As a child, his presence made me feel safe. As an adult, I continued to feel the same quiet support, not always through grand gestures, but in the steady way he showed up for our family. He met life's celebrations with joy, its grief with tenderness, and its hardships with courage, humor, and grace. Whenever we siblings were together, it did not take long before we were back in our childhood, telling old stories, laughing at the absurd, and remembering moments only the 4 of us could fully understand. Those memories connected us in a way, time, that distance never erased. Though years separated us, we carried the same family history, the same beginnings, the same inside jokes, the same joys, and the same hardships that shaped us. In recent years, our conversations often turned to our families, the choices that shaped our lives, and what it meant to leave California behind. We both understood the pull of building new lives closer to the people we loved. Michigan for him and Oklahoma for me. Agreeing that California's climate was about the only thing that we truly missed, Humidity may be awful, but we both knew that being near our grandkids made every inconvenience worthwhile. In that season of life, family mattered most, and Brock understood that deeply. Brock was the anchor of his family, his wife Sherry, his 3 sons and their families, and also his siblings. It was not a role he announced or sought attention for. It was simply who he was. His steadfastness showed in the way he listened, offered help, gave quiet guidance, and made those he loved feel supported. He was especially attentive to our mother as she adjusted to life as a widow, checking in on her, helping where he could, and giving her reassurance during a difficult season. She often spoke of his care with deep gratitude, and it was clear how much comfort his presence brought her. Brock lived with a wonderful sense of humor that I can still picture his smile and the quiet chuckle that often followed as he enjoyed the humor of a thought or situation. His laughter was gentle and familiar, and it brought warmth to those around him in a way that was uniquely Brock. Brock's character was defined by selflessness, humility, compassion, and empathy. His kindness was genuine, his concern for others was sincere, and the way he lived reflected the depth of his heart. Brock, your role model as my big brother went far beyond birth order. You were and always will be my hero, and I will miss you deeply.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, we'd like to thank you all for being here today. It means a lot to our family to have so many people here to remember my dad and celebrate his life with us. Your presence and your support and the memories you've shared with our family over these past few weeks have meant more than I can say. On that note up top, I know there are many stories that we have not heard yet, and we do want to hear those. We don't want them to disappear. If you have any stories, memories, adventures you shared, or even just a small moment that stayed with you, we want to hear it. If many of you already have his email account, it's just his name at Gmail, brockriddle@gmail. We're repurposing that as a place where you can send these today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, whenever it comes to you, fire it off. On to the sad stuff. A week ago, we gathered in California, where our family grew up, to remember my dad and the community that helped shape him. Today, we're here in Michigan, where he later built a life of his own. Adding to it his perfect partner, and our number one Nana, Sherry. Her beautiful family, and the community that embraced him. But, in all fairness, if my dad were here today, he'd take one look outside at the beautiful weather, and he'd wonder, what are we doing? I think he'd understand why we're here, that this is for the living and not for him. But I'm also sure he'd be giving us a healthy dose of side-eye over now 2 days spent inside in his name instead of being outside. So I will say on his behalf, if we have a third memorial, he's going to haunt us. That was my dad. He loved being outside, he loved staying active and pushing himself. He took incredible pride in his health, his home, and his family. We've also learned since my dad passed just how much work he was doing. Keeping up with his house and yard has practically been a full-time job. I don't know how he did it, But he did, and he did it in his very Brock way. Level, square, and precise weren't just suggestions, they were his mindset. You can see that in the things that he left behind. Our childhood home, so much of which he built himself, and is a testament to his craftsmanship. Or more recently, when I asked him to help me build a simple chicken coop, and instead I got a chicken palace. At the time, I was always mindful of how long it was taking, and oftentimes annoyed at his perfectionism. But I now see he was building bits of his legacy. He took a lot of pride in making things beautiful and doing them right. Just days after his heart stent was placed, during one of our more recent heat waves, Jeff, my brother, and I both independently thought we should call Dad and make sure he's not, out in the heat. He was. He was outside working on his new garden fence, making it perfect. He was taking our calls while he worked, and we tried to convince him that maybe, this once, he could go inside and take it easy. I'm pretty sure that all we accomplished was delaying him from getting back to his fence, because that was my dad. I think the only times we could really ever get him to slow down were when it meant sharing the things he loved with the people he loved, because if he didn't slow down, no one would keep up. For instance, before I was born, my dad took a joyride on his bike from San Francisco to the Lake Tahoe. For those in Michigan, that's about 200 miles from sea level to 6,000 feet, an actual mountain. 15 years ago, approximately, he and his buddy rode from, again, the San Francisco Bay Area, but this time going south 500 miles to San Diego for fun. And most recently, perplexingly, he approached each of us about riding around Lake Michigan with him. The whole way. 1,000 miles. At the time, I thought it was crazy, because it was crazy, and I'm pretty sure I told him exactly that. I know that ride probably would have killed me, but I wish I had done it. To have that time with my dad now, and honestly, I want to know what he would have suggested next. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. As Steve said, this is Brock's second funeral. He was always an overachiever. I want to thank the pastor and thank Martin. Martin had quite the journey to get here. This last month for me I would describe as a shock. My dad was the healthiest person I knew. He went to the gym every day. He loved running and biking. He's the only person I know who a break from work to relax was going on a run. And his diet was just as disciplined. One time I went to my dad's house and helped him in the yard all morning. And we took a break to go in for lunch and he went to wash his hands. And I opened his refrigerator and it was completely empty except for a few bell peppers and a thing of hummus. And I said, "Dad, you don't have food for lunch." And he looked over my shoulder and said, "What, you don't like bell peppers?" That guy's gone. We just thought we had a lot more time with him. So I've spent the last few weeks thinking about who he was in his life. When I was a kid, my dad seemed very normal to me. Both my parents did. I think as a kid, you don't know anything and everything a parent does seems ordinary. But as I grew up, I started to get a sense of who my dad was and what made him unique. Normal people don't tell their wife they'll meet him in Tahoe and then get on their bike in San Francisco and start pedaling. And now that he's gone, I think because his story is concluded, I feel like I'm seeing him with a lot more clarity. To me, my dad was, above all else, a man of unwavering values. He put other people first, especially his family. He believed in honoring commitments and taking responsibility, and that most problems can be solved through sheer hard work and perseverance. A lot of people have reached out and offered their condolences, and many have shared stories. One of the themes we've heard from these stories is that when people needed someone the most, my dad suddenly appeared. I have a similar story to the ones they heard in my own family. When my dad's mother-in-law, my Nana, got sick. She was in her 90s and her health was starting to fail. At one point, she ended up in the hospital and in hospice. And at the time, she didn't have a lot of family in the Bay Area. She had her daughter, my aunt, and me. Her other daughter, my mom, had passed away 12 years earlier. Her husband, my papa, 5 years before that. Steve was living in Hawaii at the time, and Jeff was living in New York. So it was just my aunt and me, and I felt a lot of responsibility to be there for her. And then every time I went to the hospital to visit her, my dad was there. And the few times he wasn't there, she would tell me that I just missed him, and I'd call him on the phone, and he was always running an errand and on his way back. The day before my Nana passed, my dad was with her in the evening. He could tell she wasn't doing well, and so when he got home, he wrote the family an email. The first part was kind of a status update, but I want to read the second part here. He wrote, "For me, the death experience has a way of defining life, as it reminds me this body will eventually grow tired, and I too will follow those I love that have journeyed before me. It also reaffirms life is to be experienced, with the goal of being able to look back when the time comes and say I gave it a good shot. Didn't live sitting on the sidelines watching. Nana's there now, and she'll move along soon to join Papa and Mom, their gain and our loss. There's a connection in all of this, as we all seem to be tied together in one way or another. It also seems to me death doesn't loosen the hold we have on each other, just shifts the landscape with those we can see. Although Nana's passing will be another painful experience for us, her spirit will continue to be part of us, as the love she shared so easily will remain with us to embrace." The last month has been very difficult, but there's a small part of me that's also felt grateful. I had a great dad for 43 years, and I feel pretty lucky for that. It occurred to me while planning his funeral that he was only 3 years older than me when he was at the same church we were at in Burlingame with the same pastor planning my mom's funeral and raising 3 kids. He still emailed us every year on her birthday and on the anniversary of her passing. He was a listening ear when you needed it and a rock that anyone could lean on. And he was always, as he would say, an extra set of hands. One of the last times I saw my dad, he was flying back to San Francisco. I was building a greenhouse in my backyard. He loved stuff like that. So I told him, texted him just, hey, when you get into town, why don't you come up and hang out? And so he did. He got his truck and he drove up to San Francisco and he let himself in and he walked into the backyard. And I knew he wasn't feeling 100%. So I had gotten a chair out and put it in the shade next to where I was working in the yard. And when he walked down to the yard, I said, "Dad, I got you a chair. Why don't you sit and relax?" And he looked at me confused and reached into his back pocket and pulled out work gloves that he travels with, I guess. And he said, no, how can I help? I'm going to miss him.
I want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. Thank you to Mayflower Church, to Pastor Kent. I really appreciate your story earlier. Actually, it made me feel better. I've been feeling pretty awful this week. Thank you to Sherry, thank you, Sherry, who loved my dad completely. Thank you to our spouses, our children, and our step family, especially Kristen, Ken, Kelly, and Jake, who love my dad like their own, and who've been a huge support through these times. I also want to thank Martin Storo here. Martin flew in from New York. Took him 24 hours, 2 airports. Transferred to Detroit and then drove in at the very last second to be here to share his music with us. My dad was a huge fan of his and was a big supporter of his, and he would be so thrilled if he's here. And I know the next song is a song that's from Martin's musical that's actually about grief, the musical. So I think it would be really appropriate for him to play it today, so I'm excited for him to share that. And thank you to our extended family, those that have traveled great distances to be here, and hundreds of friends who reached out with love and support. It's been a reminder of how much family and community matter, and we're really so grateful to all of you. I'll be honest, I was going to just throw out my eulogy today, which I read and shared last week. We're exhausted. This has been a really hard moment, and we're trying to hold it up, hold the family together the way Brock did so skillfully for his entire life. And in reflecting on how I wanted to approach today, feel my dad and feel his words that he would get up here and do exactly what I'm going to share with you today, because this is really about sharing with this group, community of people about what happened to him, so that you know what happened to with my dad at the end, and sharing my reflections as to what I think this all means. So I'm going to do it. So hang in there. It's a little long, but I'll get through quickly. All right, 13 years ago, my youngest brother, Stephen, graduated from college on the big island of Hawaii. My brothers and I did what we do. We turned the week-long beach vacation into a contest. Whoever showed up in the best shape wins. We trained for months. We talked trash the entire time. We land, drop our bags at the Airbnb, and head straight for the beach. And then my dad takes off his shirt. We just looked at each other and laughed because it was over. Look, Brock had no idea there was a contest. He came to Hawaii to watch his son graduate, and his almost 59-year-old body smoked us. Absolutely jacked, six-pack abs, his muscles even had tiny muscles of their own. He was a sight to behold. We watched him walk up and down the beach, completely unaware that heads were turning in all directions towards him. And we did what any 20 and nearly early 30-year-olds do. We suppressed our shame. And we made fun of him. And we affectionately named him Robo Brock. And most of you here in Michigan knew him as Robo Brock, a chiseled 71-year-old with 7% body fat and the resting heart rate of a hibernating mammal. 44, most recently, if you're curious. He loved doing pull-ups at the MVP next to the young guys. He would brag about it all the time, just to remind them he could do more than they could. So yes, a heart attack. It's a shock to all of us. It's still a shock to all of us. And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what the heck happened. So I'm going to tell you what happened, and I'm going to tell you something that I can't explain in my reflections. So a little bit about Brock. He believed doctors were overrated. No offense to any doctors in the room. And that most everything, flus, colds, and even in my case, appendicitis, could be cured by going for a run. He was like the father in my big fat Greek wedding, except instead of Windex, his cure-all was running shoes and sweat. Years ago, an oncoming car took a turn way too tight in the hills where we grew up in California, and my dad had to bail out on his motorcycle. This was a short phase of his, but this was the end of it. What started as a bruise on his leg grew into a football-sized cyst. Years went by, thousands of miles log pounding the pavement, and instead of going to the doctor about the large protuberance on his leg, he just simply bought baggier jeans. He hated aging more than anyone I've ever met. My mom used to hand him his running shoes on his birthday and just say, "Go." And he had a whole running commentary about aging. He'd say, "Boys, if I ever end up in a wheelchair, boys, if I ever lose my mind, boys, if I can't run or bike or swim or build or cut down trees." And then he'd follow with this, which is a little risque for church, but we're doing it anyway. He'd say 2 words, Smith & Wesson. It's my dad. As he got older, he'd half-jokingly tell us the best birthday gift he could ever get would be a call from his mom telling him he was actually born a year later in 1955. And that was Brock. He was also private, especially about his health, which for 71 years was nearly flawless, until a couple of months ago when he couldn't outrun his genetics. Over the last year, Brock had settled shoulder pain whenever he pushed his cardio. It kept him from running, so he finally relented and sought a physical therapist, who eventually, and a bit skeptically, suggested he see a cardiologist. The cardiologist found his artery significantly blocked, and that was a shock to his family, to his doctors, and far more than we'll ever know, an emotional, psychological, and physical tidal wave of shock to Brock. After all, this is the Brock who worked out every day. The Brock known for epic bike rides from San Francisco to Tahoe, as we've talked about. The Brock who fasted 20 hours a day, and when he did eat, he ate salad smoothies, which was spinach, broccoli, almonds, protein powder, water, and maybe a little tomato for flavor. I never assumed Brock would have a health issue. I personally figured he'd, what I'd call, field of dreams it. He'd wander off in the mountains of California with a chainsaw, and then we'd never hear from him again. What the doctors found was a genetic protein called lipoprotein little a. You're born with it. Diet doesn't touch it. Exercise doesn't touch it. So no, there was no secret love affair with candy bars or prime rib. Unbeknownst to Brock, his body was working against him from the day he was born. And trust me, the heart of Brock tried to fight back. His heart had been so strong that it grew new vessels to route around the blockages, which certainly extended his life, but probably and unfortunately obscured what was really going on until it was too late. The docs gave him a choice, open heart surgery or stents. And 3 months on his back was never going to be an option, so he chose the stents. We'll never fully know what happened next, whether his heart was actually weaker than we thought, or whether he was one of those outliers where the stents didn't take. But the procedure didn't give him back what he lost. It seemed to only make things worse. And to be honest, he was miserable. He could feel his body slowing down, could feel himself incapable of pushing at the level he wanted. The Brock pace of life, always pushing, moving, building, doing, was at risk. And he knew it, we knew it, but we all believed it would turn around, because it was Brock. My last morning with my dad, less than a week before he passed, we enjoyed a quiet cup of coffee while the rest of the house was asleep. He and I sat in the same chairs in his den where we'd enjoyed early morning coffee and father-son conversations dozens of times before. He looked at me and earnestly said, "Jeff, I can't live like this." He wasn't complaining and he wasn't warning me. He was telling me who he was. He had one speed. He's going to live at that speed come hell or high water, heart condition or otherwise. And in true Brock fashion, he was doing exactly that. Shortly after the stent procedure, he still went to the gym every day. He was still doing his appraisals, and he was making the world more beautiful by building the fence that Stephen mentioned. And we even looked at it, thinking maybe we'll finish it for him in his honor. And then we noticed he built this perfectly floating dowel system, and we scrapped that idea. I mean, seriously, I've been swearing at him a lot. Couldn't you just build a normal fence? You know? So on July 10th, just a couple weeks after his procedure, Brock woke up in California on the futon he kept tucked in the corner of his office. He went to the gym at 3:45 a.m., grabbed a Starbucks, started his day of appraisal work. He talked to Garrett on the phone between appointments about the greenhouse he'd been helping him build in his yard. He worked his way up and down the San Francisco Peninsula, taking pictures of properties, measuring homes, and meeting with clients as he'd done thousands of times. He pulled into the parking lot at the Crystal Springs Reservoir Trailhead around noon local time, a beautiful paved hiking trail overlooking San Francisco's water reserves, only a few miles up the hill from our hometown. This was a normal day for Brock in California. And over the next hour and 56 minutes, he walked 6.07 miles along the reservoir. 18 minutes and 17 seconds per mile, average heart rate of 85. No sign of stress, no irregularities anywhere in his Apple Watch data. He got into his beloved 25-year-old black F-150, and before he even put on a seatbelt, his heart stopped. Brock went out in the most Brock way possible. No walkers, no wheelchairs, no retirement homes. What could be more my dad than to go out moving? Vibrancy until the very end. It's poetic. And yet something doesn't make sense. The day before he died, he visited Garrett, Jennifer, and Bridget at their home in San Francisco, and he was worried there about walking a few blocks to dinner. And the week before that, he asked Sherry to turn around on their walk after a quarter mile. Yet on his final day, he walked 6.07 miles at pace with a normal heart rate. As I've reflected on his final moments, I can't help but call this out, that shouldn't have happened. Because Brock's heart was not in 6.07 mile shape, let alone 1.07 mile shape. It's like the mother who lifts a car for a child, or the person with dementia who becomes completely lucid just before they pass. I believe something divine happened in the final hours of my dad's life. That his final moments transcended flesh and blood, carbon and oxygen, gravity and friction. I believe his final walk existed in the space between. With more time and reflection, I can't help but get the feeling that some part of Brock knew he was at the finish line. That perhaps the veil had been growing thinner around him for weeks. I believe some part of him knew when he planted 8 trees from his garden at my cottage in Northport. Just the two of us, our last significant father-son time together, putting down roots in our yard with the trees he grew from seedlings. Some part of him knew when he took his granddaughter Violet for the weekend, and and when he and Sherry had an impromptu 6-grandchild sleepover exactly 1 week before he passed. Some part of him knew when he played catch with my son Ryan in his front yard just days before, when he gave my family hugs that lingered just a little bit longer. And some part of him knew when he made sure to get back to California to see Garrett and Jennifer and to snuggle his infant granddaughter Bridget one last time. 25 years ago, when my mom was dying in her hospice bed, she had one request of my dad: take care of the boys. Losing her was beyond devastating, but he found purpose in that request. And I believe he felt closer to her every day he dedicated his life to his family. He did almost to a fault. And some part of me wonders if Brock had simply fulfilled his purpose. It doesn't explain the hole we all feel, but I find it fascinating that just a few weeks before my dad passed, I was overwhelmed with a feeling of total contentment. Total contentment with my family, my community, my career, my life. And I felt this way for days on end. I shared this feeling with Emily, though I never told my dad. But as I said, with the dissonance of these two experiences, I don't think that they're at odds. Brock raised 3 wonderful grown men who are happily married, exceptional fathers, thoughtful humans who are deeply rooted in their lives, families, and communities in California and Michigan. The bottom line, our mom would be proud. She is proud. And I think some part of him could feel the completeness. With a little more reflection, I believe my dad had company on that final walk. That the veil had disappeared, and he was joined by my mom and other loved ones that had passed before him. The 6.7 miles wasn't a workout, 6.07 miles wasn't a workout, or he was getting his steps in. It was a celebration of life and of the man he continued to grow into in the years since my mom passed. I believe my dad and mom walked arm in arm and talked about how much my brothers and I have been loved. That her grandkids have someone they will look up to for the rest of their lives. And that Brock found love again in the arms of an amazing woman, just as my mom hoped he would. A woman that brought him immense joy, who became a mother to his boys, and a nana to his grandkids, who loves them just as he did. I believe it wasn't a 6.07-mile walk, it was a transition, a miracle beyond our ability to understand. And by the time he made it back to the truck, Brock, Pops, Dad, husband, Papa, Uncle Brock, Broccoli Spears, Robo Brock had already crossed over. The heart attack was just God's pomp and circumstance. 11 years ago, in the final days before Emily and I moved to Michigan, I went for a walk at the Crystal Springs Reservoir to reflect on my 30 years living in the Bay Area, the same trail where my dad took his last walk. It was a cool, overcast morning, fog lingering out in the reservoir. About a half mile in, I saw what looked like a massive bird in the distance coming straight at me. As it got closer, I could make out the white head and the wingspan of a bald eagle. It kept coming and passed not 20 feet over my head. I wouldn't have believed it, except for a few other people nearby who were just as wide-eyed as I was. It was the first bald eagle I'd ever seen in California, and let alone in that reservoir, which I've been to 100 times. Fast forward 11 years, it's July 10th, 2026. Just a few weeks ago, we're at our beach cottage in Northport, and I wake up from a nap with a fiction book open across my chest. Beautiful northern Michigan afternoon, breeze coming through the open sliders, waves crashing across the street. I threw on my bathing suit and walked over to join Emily and the kids. Emily was pointing up at a tree right behind them. She had watched the bald eagle fly across Lake Michigan and perched in that tree just as I walked up. It was the first eagle we'd seen at the cottage. We played in the water, and the kids and I hunted for Petoskey stones, and the whole time the eagle just stayed still. And I couldn't keep my eyes off of it. I kept waiting for it to fly off, to hunt, to do something. It just sat there, surveying its domain. It was still there hours later when we walked back to the cottage. Now knowing when and how Pop spent his last few hours, I understand that eagle in the trees at the beach differently. That eagle was with us in real time for the entirety of my dad's final walk at the reservoir. 2 weekends ago, after a few weeks of grieving, we went back to the cottage for some much-needed R&R before flying out to San Francisco for the first memorial service. The night before, I'd been listening to a podcast about grief, and it suggested that those who are grieving ask the person who passed for a sign. The more specific, the better. I didn't even think twice to ask Pops for an eagle. That afternoon, I woke up on the same couch, same book across my chest, same breeze, same waves. Em and the kids had already gone down to the beach, so I threw on my suit and walked over, and truly not expecting anything. and there in the tree was a bald eagle, perched right over top of us. It hadn't been there the entire hour. Emmy and the kids had been at the beach. It arrived when I arrived. The most joyful feeling washed over me. Of course, Pops is with us. It's not really a question that needs asking. It's hard, yes. We mourn his quiet but strong presence, his sense of humor, his love and passion for his family, his constant motion to make the world better for those that he loved. We miss him deeply, and while he won't finish his fence, nor will we, the best of him, his love, wisdom, humor, and gentle guidance is always there with us. The eagle stayed there while we swam and hunted for Petoskey stones. It was still there as we started packing up to head back for dinner. We broke down the chairs, folded the towels, loaded the wagon, ready to go. I took one final look up and it was gone. I looked for it for a few minutes, expecting to see it out of the water hunting or another tree, but it had just disappeared. I couldn't help but smile. My Pops lived a great life. He loved deeply, he moved with passion, he built things that will outlast him, and he pushed until the very end. I will miss him, but I know he's with us. And he's telling us to stop crying over him, keep pushing, and go for a run. Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to invite the grandchildren up for a reading.
Way back in the 1900s, before viral posts and internet memes, people used to have to rely on the newspapers for information and entertainment. A version of the reading we are going to share with you today was printed in a newspaper when Brock's boys were younger. He liked it so much he cut it out and hung it on the family fridge. It remained there for years to inspire those who noticed it. I hope you're inspired too. What did you do with your day today? Did you make someone smile? Did you take time to listen, to help, or show someone you cared?
At the end of the day, could someone say, "They were kind to me today"?
Did you make even one person's day a little brighter? Did you give someone hope, encouragement, or a reason to smile?
Did your words or actions help someone feel loved? When you think about your day, did you use it well?
Did you leave kindness wherever you went? And as you close your eyes tonight, can you thank God for the way you lived today?
Can you imagine him smiling and saying, "Well done, you made the world a better place today"?
We know Papa would answer yes.
He made people smile.
He helped people.
He made people feel loved.
He made the world a better place.
We will miss him every single day.
What a beautiful and inspiring hour we've had together. We're so glad you were here. Believe it or not, just last week I thought, I wonder how many days off I'd have to take to bike all the way around Lake Michigan. So now I'm starting to think that was a good idea. The family would like to invite you into the atrium for some light refreshments afterwards. In addition, in our chapel, they'll be playing a video with photographs and memories that we'd invite you to slip in and sit and watch the video, the slideshow, and the music. And then, in addition to just meeting the family, talking together in the atrium, there's an opportunity for you to sign a baseball. That's a way of saying I was here, you know. So sign a baseball. There's also a chance for you to pick up a stone that the grandchildren made, and if you're brave, a tattoo. I'm fairly sure they're not permanent, but we'll see. So that's in just a few moments. So I'm just going to end with a benediction before Martin plays. When I'm done with the benediction, I'll invite the family to follow me out, and then once the family's out, you can begin to make your way as Martin plays. So this is a very old benediction. It's the oldest benediction in the Hebrew Bible. It's called Aaron's benediction. And this is how it begins. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, and may he give you peace. Peace be with you.